What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. My name is Kyle Yates, and I am your host. I am joined by Mike Tagliere, and you can find us on Twitter at KyleYNFL and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, how's it going, man?
I mean, it's weird talking to you again. We haven't talked on a podcast since, Friday? I mean,
I know
that sounds like it's not a long time, but for me and you, it is kind of a long time.
It is, when you and I talk as much as we do. It's a few days absent is a long time there. So, hey guys, we are joined by Adam Rank of NFL Network. He can be found on Twitter at Adam Rank. Adam, welcome back to the podcast, man.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. What do you guys talk about all the time? Is it strictly fantasy, or do you guys delve into other subjects?
Every now and then we'll talk about some off-the-wall topics, like we'll talk about food, heavy disagreements about food on this show. I mean, I think that's been an ongoing thing. We have a Toy Story character that hosts sometimes. I don't know if you've met Woody yet, Dan Harris, our other host, but
right.
So we there's definitely some shenanigans that go on in between, and usually when you're on, Adam, we tend to have more shenanigans than usual.
For sure, and we all know that Woody is like the worst character on Toy Story, right? Like, I don't care for him at all. Like he's such
your
a
favorite?
punk. No. First of all, he's such a punk but like Buzz I'm sorry, he was in a toy store, and then all of a sudden he got brought to Andy's house. It's not his fault. Sorry. Why don't you be better, Woody? That's on you. That's not on Buzz.
I just had. Go ahead.
And I also want to say, it's probably because of recency bias, Duke Kaboom is hilarious, but it's like, I'm also offended that they made Toy Story 4. Because you're like, 3 was the best. Like, that was the perfect ending.
Oh, yeah, that was the way to stop. I haven't watched 4, because I was like,
either.
3 was the way to stop it, man.
Ignore 4. It should be one of those animated, it's an hour and a half animated short that, should have been about 11 minutes that they could have put on Disney Plus. They didn't need to make a full movie, and I know that Tom Hanks or Tim Allen were like, I was crying. I'm like, I was crying at the end of 3 like I should have been. That was the end of the series. Like, stop it, you guys. Like, you're not rich enough. Like, was Wild Hogs such a bomb that Tim Allen had to go and make more money? And by the way, I loved Wild Hogs, but still.
I thought it was a fun movie too.
Thank you. Yes, it was good.
Oh, my word. All right, well, hey, I just have to say this before we move on. Guys, we did it. It finally happened that we now have 3 Bears fans on the podcast at one time.
Whoa.
So we're just going to be spending the next hour discussing the Bears quarterback competition. So buckle up for that.
Don't run away now.
Let's do it. Let's talk about David Montgomery 1.01. Because Graham Barfield last night, or probably yesterday, put out a thing where he said that, hey, he led the league in the highest percentage of goal line rushes.
He was second. So he was actually, in terms of like a percentage of his team's carries inside the 5-yard line, he was second only behind Leonard Fournette. I do know that.
Whatever. Listen, 1.01.
1.02 behind Leonard Fournette,
All right.
obviously.
There we go. All right. Hey, guys, I got to tell you about this. We have got the Fantasy Fest live stream happening this Thursday. I want to make this clear that we are able to do this because of the support shown by our fans by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Just a side note, this is why subscribing to our YouTube channel is so important. It's super quick and easy to do, and you get great things like this as a result. Like I said, this is happening Thursday, August 20th at noon Eastern. Tags, is this a 1-hour live stream, 2-hour live stream?
No, it's not. We're celebrating 10 years as a company of Fantasy Pros, and we're doing a 10-hour live stream. And, Yates, when they first asked me about this, like, do you want to do it? I'm like, show up and talk about football for 10 hours? Of course I want to do that. I mean, if you asked me to sit in a room locked in there with, my 3-year-old, I might hesitate. But to talk about football for 10 hours, I'm in, man.
That's right. 10 straight hours of nothing but fantasy football, and we've got some incredible guests coming on, like Jake Seeley, Andy Behrens, Jamie Eisenberg, and so many more. And we'll be getting their thoughts on must-have players, sleepers, bold predictions, draft strategy, you name it. This is going to be happening on YouTube, so head over to youtube.com/fantasypros and make sure to hit the subscribe button. You can also get notifications set up for this too. If you are a subscriber, you will be eligible to receive free prize giveaways every single hour. I cannot wait for this.
It's going to be so much fun. If you guys were there for the live stream that Yates and I did for the NFL draft, it's going to be kind of like that, but just like nonstop action. And Woody will be there as well.
There we go. That's reason to tune in. All right, guys. I want to pivot.
How was I not asked? That's very. I'm sitting here being like, how are you talking about this while I'm sitting here? You're talking about some epic party that I'm not invited to.
Hey, hold on a second, Adam. I personally will invite you right now. If you want to come and crash the party, I am 100% down with that.
No, I'm good. No, send me the deeds. I'll do it. When is it again?
It's on Thursday.
That was
Thursday.
me.
We're starting the stream at 12 Eastern time, and we're running all the way up until 10 Eastern time PM. So I know we have a few openings in there that where it's going to be just me, maybe just me and Yates or me and Dan talking. So yeah. We'll definitely get you in there, man.
Hook it up, yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's go. All right. Well, hey, guys, I want to pivot here and get your guys' thoughts on some recent news that came out, and we can discuss the fantasy implications of it. So the first news item is that Doug Peterson, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, says they have told Miles Sanders that you're the guy this season. Adam, I'm going to turn this over to you. This question has been hanging over Sanders for the majority of the offseason, but he's going to be elevated into the true workhorse role. Does this news item bump Sanders up your rankings, or where do you have him?
You know what? I'd already had him pretty high already. I had figured he was going to end up being the person. And, you know, a lot of these times, you know, everybody's a little apprehensive. Everybody, you know, becomes an expert. Like, well, he's too small. I'm like, look, we saw enough of him last season to say that this should be the player. You know, towards the end of the season, obviously, he got the opportunity with Jordan Howard being out. And coming into this year, this is one of the things that I know that Brad Evans has always been a huge advocate of this, is like, this is why I sometimes like drafting at the end of July, because I was steadfast in my enthusiasm for Miles Sanders. And I'm like, I should be rewarded for this. Now, your friends or coworkers who aren't paying attention, all of a sudden are like, what? Miles Sanders is, I'm going to draft him before, when he could have gone in the third round. Mm-hmm. Maybe. I'm being generous, but still.
Well, late second, early third is fair.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so now I believe it'll drive up the price, which is fine. He's a great talent. I think he's great for that offense. I believe that again, you know, I look at the Eagles, and a lot of what happened to him was circumstance. But it always seems like the Eagles have injuries, especially at the wide receiver position. If you're going into a year thinking like, well, they've got a healthy Deshaun Jackson, they've got a healthy Alshon Jeffrey. Yeah, for how long? They're going to go back. By week 6, they'll be running 12 personnel almost exclusively. It'll be the 2 tight ends and Miles Sanders carrying that team. Maybe Jalen will be out there on the field as well. But I love this move. I would not hesitate. If you're in the early part of the first round and you take one of the top 4 guys, hopefully you get Miles Sanders coming back. Because
the question is, how high do you take him? So I'm looking at my rankings right now. I have Miles Sanders. It's right in that Nick Chubb territory, that Kenyon Drake territory. Like, those are the guys that, I mean, I'll take him over Aaron Jones. I'll take him over Josh Jacobs right now. But Miles Sanders, just how high are you willing to take him? Because I think right now, if you really want him on your roster, you're going to have to take him at the end of the first round. At the very latest, I think he's going to fall to maybe pick 14. I think that's as late as he falls. So are you willing to take Miles Sanders ahead of, you know, some of those guys I was mentioning?
Oh, I'm in. It's funny because you mentioned those guys. I just did a mock draft recently. I was at the end of the first round. My first 2 picks were Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Josh Jacobs. So I have Josh Jacobs ahead of him slightly right now. I would have a really difficult decision between him and Kenyon Drake, but I'm sure that I'm going. Ask me on the day of to see which way I'm going. It's not close for me, but I would definitely take him ahead of Nick Chubb. I'm not drafting Aaron Jones. I'm not drafting the Bengals RB1. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys that go in there too. I'd rather have him than Dalvin Cook.
Oh, wow.
That's another.
Okay.
Let me tell you something. Everybody, the thing with Dalvin Cook is what has hampered him his entire career is the injuries. And then last year he played, 13 games? Maybe 4? And everybody's just like,
14, yeah.
Oh, he's good now. He's good to go. If you have a coworker who every week you're like, hey, do you want to come to happy hour? No. And one time he shows up, best time ever, and you're like, this is amazing. Like, we'll see you next week. And then you assume that he's going to show up the following week, and then he doesn't. And it's no. Again, and that's, I don't know why we're all of a sudden being like, oh, Dalvin Cook's going to be healthy forever now. Plus, at the end of last season, from week 11 on, he was what, the RB25? He averaged about 10 points a game. I'm not into it. I know a lot of people are very optimistic, and I applaud them, and I encourage everybody in front of me to take Dalvin Cook. I'm going to pick one of the guys that's going to score way more points than he does.
The reason, so Yates, I'm curious as to your take on this, but I would say the reason I believe Dalvin Cook should be going ahead of guys like Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders, without injury, I think there's a clear, like even with no wide receiver injuries, no running back injuries, I think that there's a path for Dalvin Cook to finish as the RB1 because he is involved in the passing game. He didn't score any touchdowns last year while racking up 519 receiving yards. Gary Kubiak has been a run game god. So basically, Yates, where are you at on this? Do you think that that's absurd? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that, I'm taking Dalvin Cook.
I think it all comes down to how you factor in injuries. Do you use that as an actual like quantifiable stat that you're able to then move players down, or do you use it as a tiebreaker? So if I'm on the clock and I have the choice of Alvin Kamara or Dalvin Cook, which way am I gonna be leaning, right? Because Kamara dealt with injuries last year too, but that was a one-off thing, right? It hasn't been a perpetual thing. So with Dalvin Cook, am I gonna use it as a tiebreaker? But like you said, Tex, I think there is a legitimate path for him to finish as a top 3 running back this season because of just his pure workload if he can stay healthy. That's just the issue. I don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, guys. Next news item up here is TJ Hawkinson says the ankle has been an issue for him this offseason. He notices it's still not quite 100%, but he's out there running around and trying to push forward. Tags, we haven't been talking about TJ Hawkinson much this offseason. He's been more of this kind of like in this streamer, tight end, candidate, one of these players that you kind of look at in that realm. Does this just kind of say, okay, if he's not fully 100%, I'm just going to let someone else roll the dice with streaming him, and I'm going to look at one of these other later guys?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that's falling down the draft board after hearing that, because I was actually thinking he had a potential to be a late-round sleeper, because you look at this, the Lions pass catchers, and it's very top-heavy between Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. And Hawkinson, when he was in the field last year, he was a top 12 tight end in terms of actual opportunity that he was receiving. He was very inefficient outside of that Week 1 performance against the Cardinals, which, well, everybody dominated the Cardinals. But there was a path here to where we could see progression in his career, but knowing that it's hampered him throughout the offseason and it's still not 100%, he's basically in streaming territory right now.
Sure. All right, next news item, Dez Bryant may be back in the NFL, guys. He's heading to Baltimore this week for a workout with the Ravens. Let's just say, at the time of recording, we haven't heard anything else, so let's just pretend that this happens. Does he start over Miles Boykin on the outside? Let's go with Adam. Does he start over Miles Boykin on the outside, or is he someone that we should be taking a late flyer on in our drafts?
I really want to see what kind of football shape he is in, which I know is a huge cop-out. To me, what Dez Bryant does is give the Ravens another viable option out there that defenses have to kind of account for. To me, the impact would be the biggest for somebody like Marquise Hollywood Brown, maybe even Mark Andrews a little bit, just having the presence on the field. This kind of strikes me as a move that would be great for football. Like, it's great for the Ravens. Like, you would want this player. I'm not sure that fantasy enthusiasts would see that much benefit from him.
For sure. Tags, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm not really interested in grabbing him there. I understand that he'd be a red zone threat because Dez is one of the best jump ball receivers out there. Like, he times his jumps, he high points the ball very well. But Lamar Jackson is a guy that buys time. He wants to see wide receivers open most of the time, and he has someone like that, Marquise Brown. I just don't think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't think that there's room for 3 consistent wide receivers on a fantasy basis out of this passing offense, and you already have Mark Andrews. We're relying on Marquise Brown to take that step forward. So Dez hasn't played a game since 2017, so I'd rather be cautious than aggressive with him. So I'll let someone else draft him.
That makes sense. All right, a couple of notes came out of Colts camp the other day that Rivers likes throwing to T.Y. Hilton. Tags, for me, it's never been about Hilton adjusting to a new quarterback. He's a good wide receiver. It's his health concerns. Does this move the needle for you at all on Hilton, or are you still willing to let someone else draft him?
No, because I think if you were to ask Rivers if he likes throwing to Paris Campbell, he'd probably say yes as well.
Right.
I mean, this is the stuff. I've been telling people on Twitter, and Rank, tell me if you agree with this, is that I've been telling people that don't listen to the fluff pieces out there. Don't listen to people talking good about people because everybody looks good. If you listen to all that, Terrell Pryor would have been like a top 10 receiver. Listen to the bad things. If you hear a bad report about someone like TJ Hawkinson, if you hear something bad like that come out, he's not progressing well, or he's doing this, or a coach says he needs to take a step forward. Those are the things that I actually pay attention to this time of the year. I don't really listen to the fluff pieces.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I would really love a quarterback at some point to be, you know what? Hey, how do you like throwing to T.Y. Hilton? He's like,
This
it
guy
sucks.
sucks.
Dude, he's so small. Like, I'm used to having receivers that are 6'5" and above. Like, this is not cool for me.
Right.
I can't really put too much stock in that, but I do, it's one of those things that, and I will borrow one of Tag's expressions here about who has a pathway to having, a monster season. I think that T.Y. Hilton could be one of those players that, if you look back to last year and Jacoby Brissett, and I don't want to knock Jacoby Brissett because he was dealing with a knee injury at that, week 5 on. But I think that the move to Phillip Rivers is a significant upgrade, and this is a huge opportunity. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on T.Y. Hilton. They're kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's kind of like when you're driving, and I'm probably used this analogy 1,000 times, but like where you're driving cross country, and you got to find some place to eat, and you're like, well, there's a Taco Bell here, and it's like, Taco Bell's probably not your first choice, but pretty good. It's pretty reliable. Like, okay, and then you know what? Every once in a while, you get the right combination of the Doritos Tacos Loco, and it's amazing. And I think that for his draft price, especially if you go running back heavy to start, and if you're sitting there, you start sliding a few rounds and all of a sudden you see TY and everybody's kind of avoiding him for whatever reason, I don't mind taking a flyer on him.
My only issue with him is that he's going before AJ Green. I'll take AJ Green over him. If I get T.Y. Hilton as my wide receiver 3, around that wide receiver 28 to 32 range, I am all about getting T.Y. Hilton there because you kind of have some risk baked in because he's dealt with injuries as well. A.J. Green has dealt with injuries, but A.J. Green has a better quarterback coming to play with him right now, and he's produced as consistently as a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in the majority of his games, whereas T.Y. Hilton's been a little bit more a boomer bust than Green. So I would say that Hilton belongs behind A.J. Green, and that's why I don't have very many shares because they're going in the same territory. But I don't necessarily think that T.Y. Hilton's a bad pick as a wide receiver 3.
Wait, wasn't A.J. Green already hurt on Monday?
Well, I mean, T.Y. Hilton was already hurt 2 weeks ago.
Listen, if you want to hit me with logic, I don't want to chit-chat. Don't wreck my narrative. Monday, AJ Green injured. I don't know. But again, yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah.
In the fact that at the wide receiver 3 category, I would definitely be taking one of these guys right there. I think that's a perfect opportunity.
Yep.
All right, and then last news item here, Tags, Jalen Hurd suffered a potentially major knee issue in practice the other day, and it's believed to be a torn ACL. We haven't received word yet exactly what happened, but it doesn't look good. So You were excited about Hurd this season. You now have Deebo Samuel expected to miss the start of the year, and now Hurd gone. What is this 49ers receiving core going to look like to begin the year?
Honestly, I almost put out a tweet yesterday saying that if you were to give me like crazy odds, I don't know if I could say any wide receiver that I can 100% guarantee starts for the 49ers in week 1. I mean, Brandon Ayuk would seemingly be the obvious choice, but he is a rookie with a limited offseason. I think he's starting, but after him, it's like you look at Kendrick Bourne, you look at Trent Taylor, you look at Dante Pettis. They signed Tavon Austin. They signed another receiver too. I mean, I don't know what they're doing in San Francisco, but what I do know is that Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be throwing the ball a whole lot. I mean, this is a team that racked up, I think it was 424 running back carries last year. I don't know if that number goes down, and I think that George Kittle, if anything, it just raises his target ceiling. But Ayuk clearly has to be the main beneficiary of this, but again, I don't know if I'm excited about any of them.
Yeah, I think it's George Kittle season.
Yep.
That is, again... it's interesting when you look at what they've done in the NFC West. The Seattle Seahawks went out and got Jamal Adams. The Arizona Cardinals drafted Isaiah Simmons, all with the express intent of slowing down George Kittle. I'm not sure that you can. And I really do believe that this news, when I thought of this, because a lot of times when you hear about a wide receiver getting injured, you think of like, who's the next wide receiver who would take his place? And Tags goes through the whole list right there. But it does come down to George Kittle getting more opportunity. Less competition. I think some of the receivers will be catching balls out of the backfield. If you've liked Tevin Coleman so far this offseason, you might want to bump him up a spot or two. But I really love George Kittle. And, this is another one of those things where if you're at the end of I would probably feel more comfortable at the end of the second round. But I always think that there's a lot of benefit of getting one of those top 2-tier tight ends, especially Kittle or Kelsey, but especially Kittle in this instance where there is absolutely no competition for targets.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he could absolutely explode to start the season, and then I don't see that stopping anytime soon. Even if Deebo Samuel does come back sooner than expected, Kittle is going to be a monster this year. Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, we are going to move into the main content for today's show, and that is sleepers. Identifying these players ahead of time and drafting them late can make a huge difference for your fantasy roster. We know that. So let's look at players that are currently going outside the top 120 in half PPR ADP. We'll do a roundtable discussion and get to as many players as we can. Tags, let's go to you first.
I want to let Rank because I don't want to steal his guys. I'm going to give him that opportunity to go ahead and say, you know what, Rank? Even if you take one of my guys, I'm going to pick another one. So I want you to go ahead and start with your first guy.
I don't want you showing off like that. That's not cool.
But I love you, and that's why I'm doing it. I mean, but in reality, I'm sure that once you get outside the top 120 in ADP, there's going to be some similar opinions. So if we share an opinion on a player, I think it's a good thing.
No, absolutely. I'll start off with a quarterback who I really like this year is Daniel Jones. And one of the great things about having the quarterback position being as fruitful as it is the ability to scoop up players like this who can end up helping you out down the stretch and everything like that. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows, wait on a quarterback. One of the reasons I've identified Daniel Jones is I really do believe that the addition of Jason Garrett is huge for the Giants. I know there was a lot of apprehension when Jason Garrett started interviewing with the Giants, where Giants fans were like, oh my gosh, I've got to go scrub my Twitter account. I got to make sure I took down every bad thing I ever said about Jason Garrett. But they didn't want Jason Garrett as their head coach, and it was very scary. Then they hired Joe Judge, and you're like, okay, wait, who is this? But then they brought in Jason Garrett, who I believe is a perfect compliment. Because anytime you have a young coach who is a first-timer, you want to have somebody on the sideline who has called the timeout in an NFL game before. And I think that's what Jason Garrett brings. And what he brings to the offense is a guy who's going to focus on the run, obviously. He's always been the guy who features a bell cow running back. He's great for the tight ends. Jason Witten obviously had a great career when Jason Garrett was calling the plays as offensive coordinator in his first couple of years as the play caller when he was the head coach of the Cowboys. But he really worked with Tony Romo. And in Tony Romo's first season with the Dallas Cowboys and with Jason Garrett calling the plays, he threw for 4,200 yards, 36 touchdowns. Numbers I'm not anticipating Daniel Jones throwing for this season. But when you look at somebody who could have a breakout year, Jones is one of those players. Plus, if you look at the early part of the Giants' schedule, it's brutal. Like, they've got some tough games.
Bad.
Yeah, I know the 49ers are mixed in there as well. So this is a player that you look at around week 5. If you have a quarterback injury, you have a quarterback who's not performing very well, he's going to be available on the waiver wire. And I think he can be very good for you down the stretch. And he'll be one of those guys that we talk about next year being like, over the last 12 games, he was a top 5 quarterback. So I'm excited about Daniel Jones this season.
That was going to be one of the things that I brought up was his schedule, right? Yep. You go Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco, the Rams, Dallas, Washington, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, Washington, Philadelphia. Those are the first 10 weeks. Mm-hmm. That's a brutal stretch. So what are your thoughts here on Daniel Jones? And obviously, could it be like a Jameis Winston effect, right? Where this defense might not be able to, with the defenses that he's facing, he might not be able to put up incredible touchdown production, but the yardage, the pass attempts absolutely could be there because they have to throw to keep him in games.
Yeah, my concern with Daniel Jones is obviously that early game schedule or the early season schedule, because you look at Daniel Jones last year and he had 4 games where he scored 28 or more fantasy points. 4 of them. Washington, Tampa Bay, the Jets, and the Lions. 4 defenses that are not very good. Every other game that he had was fewer than 15 fantasy points, and that's not really what you're looking for. If a guy, especially with that early, I'm so glad that Rank brought up the early season schedule because it's brutal for those first 3 weeks. It's like you don't want to touch him, and I think this is important to bring up because I've heard it in a lot of places that Daniel Jones is a potential breakout candidate and he's a sleeper and this and that, but we can't draft him. You can't draft him and start him against those 3 teams. So therefore, let someone else draft him, think he's going to be a breakout. And then as Rank said, he's going to be on waiver wires after those first 3 weeks. I think you can go grab him then. And then basically you didn't spend anything to get him. You keep him on your bench and you see what happens if you could take advantage of some of those soft spots on his schedule. So I like the idea of him breaking out. It's just understanding exactly what he is and what he can or cannot do for your team.
Hence the phrase sleeper. You're like the guy who shows up at the garage sale and I'm selling a toaster with no cord and you're like, hey bro, like what's up with this toaster? It's got no cord. And you're like, yeah, that's why it's 25 cents. Okay. Like that's the discount. How dare you trying to make me look the fool here.
So good.
All right, Tags, let's go over to you.
All right, so my garage sale that I'm shopping at includes Jalen Reagor. Reagor is someone that you're probably not going to see in the top 120 or outside the top 120 picks very soon. I believe he's going to move up draft boards. He's playing the X receiver position for the Eagles this year. Alshon Jeffrey, by all indications, that's someone that we've only heard negative things about, and that he's going to be on the PUP list. He may not even be ready after the first 6 weeks. In that time, Jalen Reagor is going to carve out his role. Deshaun Jackson's never been a guy who has seen high volume. Not going to be that guy at 34 years old. The other receiver seems right now, it looks like it's Greg Ward, which is really disappointing for the Eagles as a franchise because don't forget they spent a second round pick on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over someone like DK Metcalf, who really could have been helping them on the perimeter opposite Deshaun Jackson, then Jalen Reagor in the slot, because Reagor can play all over the field. It's rare to find a receiver outside the top 120 that's probably going to lead the wide receivers in targets, receptions, yards, and potentially touchdowns, but I think that's exactly what you're getting with Reagor.
Rank, What are your thoughts here on Jalen Reagor? Obviously, Deshaun Jackson present for the time being, right? It could be only a matter of time before he misses, more significant time with injury. What are your thoughts here on Reagor?
It was something that we were talking about earlier in the show with Miles Sanders, is that the Eagles have a history with this. And I know you had mentioned how much we bake in injuries and the injury expectation when we're evaluating players. And I don't like to do that with a lot of guys. I mean, obviously I do it with Dalvin Cook. I do it with these Eagles receivers. And so that's why I love Reagor. And I really do believe that he could end up with a significant number of catches. I don't know if 80 is too ridiculous, but when you think about last year, how great Carson Wentz was playing with this cast of unknowns. It's like going and watching the Royal Rumble and like every major WWE superstar is on the shelf and they're pulling off guys off the indie circuit where if you're a hardcore person, you're like, I know who Colt Cabana is. And stop it, nerds. I know that Colt Cabana is in AEW now. But, when you're like, oh, yeah, like you're watching this being like, who is he throwing to? Like, this is insane. But I think that it was a surprise to me because when I was doing my mock drafts for NFL.com, I had the Eagles taking Justin Simmons just because I thought that perhaps he's a more polished receiver who's probably, a better route runner, a little bit more ready to go. But with Reagor's ability to move all over the field, they're going to find a use for him. So I love him and I love Miles Sanders. I don't normally like doubling up with players like that, like a running back receiver. I try to avoid it. I don't know what your philosophy is. I try to avoid that. But already talking up Miles Sanders this podcast, I would certainly target Jalen Reagor, especially for his draft price. It's just ridiculous.
I mean, Tags, we were doing the live stream on the draft, and we were at the time that the Eagles were picking, we were saying, like, Justin Jefferson has to be the pick here, right?
Sorry, I do that every time. Justin Jefferson. I say I think I was on your podcast last time. I called him Justin Simmons. Damn
it. You're good. So we were talking about and saying that Justin Jefferson seems like the logical fit here. And we weren't really projecting Jalen Reagor to be in the first round conversation. We expected him kind of early second. The Eagles selected him. They have a plan for him. And so now when you're looking at the start of the season that it's going to be Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor, and Greg Ward, he's clearly going to be on the field, and he's clearly going to be targeted.
And if I could use the garage sale analogy again. This is a brand
do.
new out-of-the-box toaster that hasn't been used.
There you go.
This is nice.
Sweet.
Like, what? And you're selling this for $1? Like, okay, sir.
It's better than the 25-cent one without a cord.
Probably.
For sure.
Probably.
I mean, it's a little bit more expensive. Dude, a quarter. I'm the idiot who does that. Like, what? This is a quarter? My wife's like, dude, it has no cord.
That's so great. So great.
All right, I'm going to continue with the garage sale analogy and the shiny new toy. Henry Ruggs in Las Vegas is the guy that I'm going to bring up here. Currently, ADP of wide receiver 46 off the board, so he's fallen outside this range that we're talking about. And I think Henry Ruggs landing in Las Vegas, obviously we can use the argument of draft capital with Jalen Reagor, and then we can apply that same argument to Henry Ruggs being the first receiver taken in a very loaded wide receiver draft. And so Henry Ruggs going to be utilized, but the thing that I love is that they're planning on utilizing him in the slot. And he's going to be moved all around the field. This is not that he's purely just going to, be off the field in 2 wide receiver sets and then only come on in the slot, but he's going to be moved in. He's going to be moved around the field. And so where you can get him these short area targets that Derek Carr loves, right? Just get the ball out of Derek Carr's hands, get it into a player as explosive as Henry Ruggs, and let him take off with it. And for a player like Ruggs and the speed that he possesses, all it takes is one slant, and he takes it 60 yards to the house, and you've won your matchup because you drafted Henry Ruggs super late and you plugged him into your flex. He's going to get targets in this offense. I think that he is going to drastically outperform where he's being drafted. This is a guy that I love targeting late. Rank, what's your thoughts here on Henry Ruggs? Do you love drafting him super late, or are you kind of on the fence?
If you want to draft the third best receiver behind Hunter Renfrow and Bryan Edwards, go ahead. Do that all day. No, I'm joking. It is one of those things. Hunter Renfrow, if we would have done this a month ago, Hunter Renfrow would have been my guy. Because he's just one of those ball players where you're like, this guy, everything is working against him, but for whatever reason, he ends up on the field. And you're like, yep, he's a good player. And he had a couple of back-to-back 100-yard games at the end of last season. I was so ready. And you can go and look at all of my mock drafts too. And I had Hunter Renfrow as my 14th round pick like every time. But it's one of those things now where they're like, oh, we're going to put Henry Ruggs in the slot. And you're like, okay, never mind. I'm going to move on here. I agree with everything that you said. And I know there's a lot of positive camp news about Bryan Edwards and things like that. But Henry Ruggs is a throwback to the Raiders' philosophy of drafting speed merchants, and it goes back to, I know you guys have never heard of this person named Cliff Branch, who should be in the Hall of Fame, by the way, but was a real game changer. And it was really one of the things that the Raiders excelled at, was finding these players. I know the Cowboys did it first with Bob Hayes. I know this because I used to hang out with Gil Brandt a lot, so he would always tell me these stories. But they would always do a great job of finding these guys. So when they drafted Henry Ruggs, you're like, you know what? I know it was easy to make the jokes about like, it was, Al Davis from Beyond the Grave making this pick. It kind of was. And I'm kind of here for it. I think this is a great opportunity. And again, the draft price is perfect. And I love taking him. And now instead of Hunter Renfrow, RIP, I've been taking Henry Ruggs a lot.
Well, I'm glad that got turned around because I'm definitely on the Ruggs side of this argument. I wasn't even a big fan of Ruggs coming out of college, but when you spend the pick that they did on him at number 12 overall over someone like Jerry Jeudy, it's just stupid. Every time I reference Ruggs being selected there in the draft, I'm going to say you could have had Jerry Jeudy, dumb. But I think a lot of people mischaracterize who Ruggs is as a player. He's not just a speed guy. He obviously has the speed to get off the top of the defense, but I'm glad that the Raiders understand what he's doing, and I think that slot role is fantastic for him. They can get the ball on screens. They can get the ball on end arounds. They can get him, just throw a quick slant, get the ball in his hands, and let him create after the catch. He has a lot of speed. He knows how to use angles. He's very good in the open field. So Ruggs, if he's getting 80, 90 targets in that Raiders offense, he's going to have wide receiver 3 upside plenty of time. So if you want to draft him as your wide receiver 4, and then you kind of plug him in when you know the Raiders are going to be throwing the ball a little bit, I love it.
Yep, for sure. All right, Rank, let's go back to you for your second sleeper.
This is like doing a draft because you're like, I want to pick a player right now, probably have to reach for him because I don't want either one of you to take him and usurp me.
That's true.
And my genius. And this is it's so funny because this is a player who, when you bring him up to fantasy enthusiasts, we all know who this is. Like, oh yeah, that's a great pick. It's a great pick. It's like finding a local band that nobody has ever heard of and you get together with a bunch of people who are really into music, and you're like, I love the Hold Steady, and you're like, yeah, why aren't they a bigger band? And you start having these arguments. So I feel that Blake Jarwin is this type of player, to where I don't want to say outsider, but like somebody whose job isn't following fantasy football might stop and be, who the hell is Blake Jarwin? But he is the new tight end of the Dallas Cowboys. And I know we're on the Fantasy Pros podcast where you guys have the experts. You know, you have a high-level listener. So I understand that this might be a little chalky for some people's taste. But I love Blake Jarwin. And as much as I was drafting Hunter Renfrow in my early drafts this offseason, Blake Jarwin is always the second tight end for me coming off the board. Even if I took Kettle or Kelsey, I just want to have this player because the big thing is last year, the Cowboys have vacated, 177 targets with Randall Cobb and Jason Witten moving on. There's a huge opportunity, even with CeeDee Lamb in the mix. Mike McCarthy is going to want to throw the football. You know, that's his way. I believe that once in his head coaching career has he had a running back who finished in the top 10 in rushing. I think it was Eddie Lacy was sixth one time, or there were six of the team. Forgive me if I have that mistaken, but
Yeah.
the point stands. So I really like this, and I really do advocate people taking that second tight end this season. I know a lot of times you draft one tight end and you don't think about it. Whether you have a stud or not, you're like, I'm just going to take one tight end. I think given the circumstances of what's going on in the world, it's better to have two. But even above that, I really do believe that it's better to take a flyer on one of these guys who will be at the end of drafts. I know, like we talked about TJ Hawkinson earlier, I would rather take Blake Jarwin just because the buzz is building, but I do believe there's a huge opportunity for him with the Cowboys.
I completely agree. Jarwin was on my list. So your strategy worked.
Boom!
Right? Where you took the guy, prevented me from getting him. No, I love it. Tags Jarwin here in a very high-scoring offense. He's the lead guy. You look at the tight end depth chart, it's Dalton Schultz behind him. Dalton Schultz isn't getting targets. You know, it's Blake Jarwin. So
no disrespect to Dalton Schultz, though.
No disrespect. But, you know, I think looking at Jarwin, he has an incredible opportunity. Where is the point where you'd be willing to take him? Obviously, there are guys that we like going later on, like Hayden Hurst. We've talked about him all off season. Tight end 14 right now. Jonnu at tight end 17. Are you willing to take Blake Jarwin right after those guys? Where are you kind of at with him?
I think Jarwin's a safe option. I have him at tight end 18 right now. It just depends on what you're shooting for. At tight end, you're looking for volume, and if there's a clear path to 80 targets among among tight ends that are going, after Mike Gesicki's of the world, he's in it. So he's in that tier. He may not come with the crazy upside because they have a lot of options they can go to in the red zone, and obviously Ezekiel Elliott is going to score a lot of those touchdowns. But a lot of people say, oh, they have Amari Cooper, they have Michael Gallup, they have now they have CeeDee Lamb. Well, last year they had two of those guys, and then this year it's like Randall Cobb saw 83 targets, so it wasn't like he saw very little volume. And I'm not going to project. I'm sorry, I'm not going to project CeeDee Lamb for over 100 targets his rookie season. I'm not going to do it. So you look at Jarwin and Witten, they combined for like 122 or 124 targets. It's very realistic that Blake Jarwin gets to 80 targets if he stays in the field. So I dig this as a late round pick. If you're going to go with that, it's almost like a Darren Waller thing from last year to say that you could find a tight end that's going to get the volume. You really don't know the outcome because you've never seen him in that role. Mm-hmm. But if you grab two tight ends, later in your draft, like say that you grab a Jarwin and you grab someone like a Chris Herndon or something like that, and kind of just see what happens between those two, I think you'll be pretty happy with the outcome.
You mentioned, I'm sorry, can I enter?
Oh, of course.
Please do.
You mentioned Mike Gesicki. I was in a draft the other day, and I made an error because in the sixth round, I probably could have grabbed my tight end, and for some reason, Keenan Allen was still on the board, so I went there because I'm an idiot. No, that's not a bad pick, but because I was on the turn, I missed out on a tight end, and I think actually Gesicki falls into your parameters of a guy who's outside of 120. I ended up with him and Blake Jarwin, and I got to be honest, I felt pretty good about it. I was normally, if I wait that long for a tight end, I feel awful. But I looked at it and I'm like, I think at least one of these two guys is going to end up hitting this season.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Mike Gesicki, the more bodies that disappear from Miami, it's more like, okay, who's the ball going to go to? Because Chan Gailey hasn't traditionally targeted tight ends, but at the same time, they're starting to run out of options.
He did when he had Tony Gonzalez.
Well, I mean, let's not compare Gesicki to Tony Gonzalez.
Listen, but it's like, I've never driven a Porsche, but I assume that I would like it. I just haven't had the opportunity.
Speaking of which, I've never driven a Lamborghini. So a Lamborghini, if you'd like to send me a car, I'd love to drive it and see how it handles.
Shooting his shot.
I am. Why not? I mean, seriously, but Porsches, I'm down with Porsche as well.
By the way, if we're trying to get, influencer credit, I need a gamer chair. If there's anybody out there. Okay, sorry. You can cut that. You can cut that out. Sorry, that was. I didn't thought we were gonna start asking for stuff, but I actually went realistic.
Santa
you went
Claus.
Lamborghini. See, this is the difference between us. You're like, you went full Lamborghini. I'm like, I just need a gamer chair. I feel it now roots me as a humble person. So anybody who's listening to this is like, Rank's kind of a jerk. You're like, you know what though? But he's super humble.
But he asked for a gamer chair.
He asked for a gamer. He didn't ask for a car. So we got to respect that.
All right, Mr. Lamborghini, what's your second sleeper here?
Well, speaking of Lamborghini, I'm going to go with someone that's extremely fast right now. A guy that I think people are forgetting about, drafted in the second round last year to be T.Y. Hilton's eventual replacement, and that's Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell may not be the route runner that T.Y. Hilton is, but he's a very polished, he is a good route runner. He actually can. He's got that 4.2 speed. Paris Campbell is going to be walking into the starting slot role for the Colts this year, and that's important. He's a guy that has experience in the offense, whereas Michael Pittman is a rookie, going to have some obviously things to learn as he moves throughout the league. But Campbell, if you think about Phillip Rivers over the course of his career, he's loved those guys over the middle of the field. It's not to say that guys like Pittman can't be targeted. The one who's like the odd man here is T.Y. Hilton because he's never really targeted that shorter perimeter wide receiver that can stretch the field like T.Y. Hilton as much. And Paris Campbell is a bigger, stronger, faster version of T.Y. Hilton. Again, may not be the football player just yet, but getting him in the 13th, 14th round is madness to me because, again, you're going to find out what you have immediately. The Colts were so high on him last year. They raved about it afterwards. They said they couldn't believe they got him in the second round. They were ecstatic about it. He's healthy. He has had time to work with Rivers this offseason. So Paris Campbell, it's just lightning in a bottle here. And again, you're going to find out what you have immediately. And if you need to cut bait, you cut bait. But I do believe that there's a chance that he is kind of like that breakout, like Terry McLaurin type player this year.
I mean, it's very similar to the argument with Henry Ruggs, where just get the ball in his hands, right? Yep. You get the ball in his hands short and let him create after the catch. He's phenomenal after the catch. So for a player who you can get super, super late, like Tags mentioned, to then get him just plenty of targets, right? In the slot, he's going to be near the line of scrimmage. Phillip Rivers is going to have time now behind this offensive line. If he can just get in these crossing patterns, slants, screens, whatever, get the ball in Campbell's hands and let him create, he's going to outperform his ADP. Because he's going super, super late. I like the call there. All right, I mention...
No,
Go ahead,
I love
Ray.
that call. You know what's funny? Is somebody mentioned this on Instagram the other day, at Adam Rank NFL, by the way. They said, don't you get disappointed where all of your friends know all of your picks? They know who you love. They know that you love Blake Jarwin at that time, Hunter Renfrow, Henry Ruggs, players like that. One of the players I love this season is Paris Campbell, and he's been the one that I don't mention at all. Because I feel like every year I need to have at least one guy where on the night of my draft with my league of record, with my friends I've known since first grade, I'm just like, oh yeah, by the way, I'll take Paris Campbell, everybody. Boom, I haven't been talking about him. Because there's two brothers, the DePaulo brothers. Oh, I have 3 teams in that league because it's always all of my players. I'm like, all right, sick. Like last year. Remember where you drafted Lamar Jackson last year? Where were you getting him? The 11th, 12th round? Doug DePaulo took him in the 7th because I'd been talking him up. He's like, I knew you liked him, so I'm taking him. And I'm like, I lost my league because of that.
Well, Rank, I think you're in trouble. You just mentioned that you should have just kept quiet when I said Paris Campbell.
I know, and I can't help myself because I feel we have a Hippocratic oath. We're like doctors in a way. Where I have to physically, it's one of those things, people always ask me, they're like, do you always help everybody, even people in your league? I'm like, yes. If there is a fantasy enthusiast who is closer than I am, if Marcus Grant is closer to that person physically, I will let Marcus take that question. But if I'm there and I'm available, it's a duty that we swore when we took these jobs to help everybody to the best of their ability. And I just couldn't help myself. Because I also desire to have the credit for being able to say, like, I told you. Like, I called that guy. What? I called it. Listen, I have to wear the 3-13 of the 49ers a lot. So if I get one, I need to be able to be like, see, I told you guys.
Right.
Paris Campbell. So I couldn't resist right there.
I like it.
All right, guys, let's move through these next names. I'm going Anthony Miller. You're looking at a wide receiver, too, that you can get on a football team that you can get super, super late at wide receiver 55 right now in ADP. And for a player who has the talent, we saw 7 touchdowns in his rookie season. Obviously, he fell off last year with the entire offense, but now it's Allen Robinson and it's Anthony Miller. And then Jimmy Graham, Ted Ginn, like Cole Kmet. These guys are not going to soak up targets in this offense. So for an offense that is going to be passing the ball, just like every other offense in the NFL, you can't give Allen Robinson 200 targets in the season. The ball has to go somewhere else. And so Anthony Miller, I think, is going to soak up targets. He has the talent to produce. If this offense can get even back to productive, right, like just even efficient, like take a slight step forward from what they were last year, he's going to outperform where you're drafting him. It's not a sexy pick. People do not want to invest in the Bears offense, but you have to soak up value where you can get them. Tags, let's just go to you really quick for Anthony Miller, and then we'll move on to Rank's third guy.
Well, I mean, everybody knows how I feel about Anthony Miller. I'm in on this, and if you look at the games last year that he was without Taylor Gabriel, there were 7 games. In those 7 games, 45 targets, 370 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaged over 9 half PPR points per game, which is nearly like wide receiver 3 territory. The guy's been playing through injuries too. His shoulder has been jacked up since he came into the league. And obviously with less than competent quarterback play, he's been putting up numbers when he's actually targeted. So knowing those targets are probably going to come this year with Taylor Gabriel gone and Ted Ginn coming in, I like Anthony Miller as a potential breakout. And I know some people are tired of hearing about Anthony Miller being a potential breakout candidate, but the talent's always been there. It's just a matter of opportunity.
I agree. I think that with 3 Bears fans here, at some point somebody's going to bring up Anthony Miller. And I have nothing else to add other than I agree with all the previous analysis.
Perfect. All right, Rank, let's go to you for your third guy here.
And since you didn't let me talk about a Bears receiver, let me have the opportunity to poop on
Darnell
the Packers a little bit. No. Let's talk about A.J. Dillon right here. I know a lot of people will look at Aaron Jones, and not people who listen to Fantasy Pros, because you guys, you're a cut above. You men and women are a cut above. Everybody, you're sharp. These are sharp minds. But I look at the situation with Aaron Jones, and the 3 of us can sit here and say that he's certainly not going to get 19 touchdowns again. But there's a lot of people who are just, I feel like I wage this battle every day on Twitter and other social media platforms where I have to tell them, like, no, he's not getting 19 touchdowns. It's just not going to happen. He was a player who split carries last year and was the beneficiary of, in some games, of Devontae Adams not being there. He had clusters of games where he just had multiple touchdowns. That's hard to replicate. So this is why I avoid him. And if you think it's me, a Bears fan, just taking shots at the Packers, no. This is coming from the Packers GM himself, who saw Aaron Jones play last season and then said, you know who we need to draft in the second round?
Yeah.
Another running back. That, to me, is the biggest red flag you talked about. Don't listen to the puff pieces. Don't listen to the, oh, look, Aaron Jones is in the best shape of his life. He's playing for a contract. The Packers drafted another running back for an explicit purpose to use him. I know you can think that, well, 2021. No. This season. And when you look at the thighs, like the quads of A.J. Dillon are ridiculous. I'm fully convinced that by the end of the season, A.J. Dillon will be the goal line back, at least with the opportunity to be a full-on RB1 type of player. You're drafting him at what spot? 200? I'm sorry, I don't have your guys' list up. But
yeah, no, he's down there for sure.
Late. Yeah.
Again, now that I don't have to draft Hunter Renfrow in the 14th round, AJ Dillon is always, that's my new, I have him on every team. I always take him super late. Always make sure he's on my roster. He has the ability to go out there and win you a league. I really do believe that. I know it sounds like hyperbole, and maybe I'm just trying to jinx the Packers. Who knows? But I really do believe that when you put that kind of draft capital into a player, when you already have somebody on your roster who scored 19 touchdowns, I can't ignore that.
Yeah, I thought about this, like, literally, I was in the car this morning. I ran out to get my wife coffee, and I was sitting there, and for whatever reason, A.J. Dillon popped into my head. And this is what happens when you work in fantasy football world for a living. I thought, I've been using the argument for Jonathan Taylor, saying you don't draft a guy like that in the second round who has a lot of miles on his system, to play a backup to Marlon Mack, right? And he's going to play right away. I'm a believer in Jonathan Taylor. I think he's going to walk in and dominate. I think people are going to look back and say, why the hell did we let him slip to the 5th round in fantasy drafts? And then I started thinking, AJ Dillon's another guy that had a lot of workload on him. Like he's shouldered a big workload over the last few years, and he was drafted in the 2nd round. The only difference is that Matt LaFleur, well, just not very smart, not a bright guy. The offensive line is not as good in Green Bay, and there just happens to be a running back on the roster who's more talented, Aaron Jones, obviously. But do the Packers believe that? And that's where I've started to try and come around to say, you know what? Maybe they're preparing for life without Aaron Jones because his contract's up at the end of this year. Jamal Williams, too, because both of them were drafted in the same draft. So I think that it's potentially they're looking forward into 2021 and saying, but it's kind of dumb when you had a team that reached the NFC Championship thinking about 2 years from now.
Right.
But that's what Matt LaFleur does.
I think here's the thing with A.J. Dillon, drafting him and he's at 183 overall. So you're getting him super, super late. And so the thing with A.J. Dillon, what you can do is you can draft him like Rank is suggesting here, and then week 1, you're going to find out what the plan is. If he gets, there is an even split with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in terms of carries, then now A.J. Dillon is a valuable piece to hold on to. If he gets 2 carries, like in week 1, then okay, cut him, pick him up, cut him and use him, use that spot to pick up someone else on waivers. So I like the call there just because he does have the ability to drastically outperform where you're drafting him, and you're going to know right away what you get with him. Tags, let's go to you for your third guy. We got to run through these.
Yeah, I'm sticking with the Packers here. I'm going to say Allen Lazard is someone that needs to be considered as a late-round sleeper. There have been 10 different times in Aaron Rodgers' career where he has supported multiple top 32 fantasy wide receivers. Allen Lazard started earning trust down the stretch. Lazard didn't do anything to screw it up last year, and you saw, I think it was over the final 4 weeks, he started jumping, getting to that 7 target range, which is really important because if you're getting 7 targets from Aaron Rodgers, it's a lot better than getting 7 targets from, say, Tyrod Taylor. So Allen Lazard is a late-round guy, is someone that, again, you're going to find out what you have right away, and I don't think there's any question about it that Lazard is starting as the number 2 wide receiver in this offense with Devin Funchess opting out for the season. So to get him in the 14th, 15th round, it just feels like who else are you taking there? You know what I mean? Right. Are you going to take someone like Danny Amendola, Cole Beasley? Why?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a huge upside pick. And again, you're going to know what you get right away, like you said. Yep. So if he isn't super involved, if for some reason MVS or Equinemius St. Brown is starting out ahead of him, which I'm not projecting in any way or predicting, but if he is, then okay, then you cut him and you pick up someone else. So yeah, you're going to know what you have right away. All right, guys, my third sleeper here is Antonio Gibson, running back for the Washington football team. He's a guy who's still going outside the top 120 in ADP. I think his ADP is going to rise by the time that we get to people actually doing their drafts. But you're looking at a player who is going to be heavily involved in the ground game, but also through the air. He's going to be heavily targeted in this offense. And until we get further clarity on what Steven Sims' role is going to be in this offense, I think we could see Antonio Gibson involved as the slot receiver. You have Terry McLaurin on the outside. Antonio Gandy-Golden's most likely going to start with Kelvin Harmon missing the season. And then Steven Sims could be the slot receiver, or it could be Antonio Gibson. If that's the case, Gibson is going to drastically outperform where you're drafting him. He is an absolute unit as a 4.3 speed, I think 4.39 at the 40, at the combine in the 40-yard dash. He's 6 foot, 229 pounds. Like, he's just blazing fast. Limited touches in college, so that's going against him, but you don't have to draft him all the way up at an RB30 price tag. But that's, I think, where he could finish if he gets a ton of work that I am projecting. So this is a guy that I love drafting super, super late.
Yep. I mean, he's someone that I think he's going sooner than that in a lot of industry leagues, but I have been able to get him in a couple drafts around 115th, 120th. I think that if you get him in the 10th round, it's like you're taking very minimal risk for the potential upside that he presents.
I agree. That would have been one of my guys as well.
Perfect. All right, guys, let's go just lightning round here. We're going to go one more player around each. Rank, let's go to you. Lightning round.
I would like to forfeit my pick to say something about the Packers. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna go with Joshua Kelly. I know a lot of people are excited about Austin Eckler. I worry that perhaps he shot his shot last season and could face a little bit of regression. He's still a talented player. He's excellent. I love Austin Eckler. No disrespect to him or anything like that. The problem is I believe that people are looking at Justin Jackson as the backup, where I truly believe that it's going to be Joshua Kelly. And the only thing that I can base this on is that I live in Southern California. I watch UCLA football games. That team was dreadful. Chip Kelly, I don't know what he's doing, but I would watch Joshua Kelly and I'd be like, you know what? If this guy was playing for another program, if he would have played at Utah, like he would have been probably one of the most sought-after running backs in the draft this season. I thought the Chargers really got a steal. I think the benefit of them being in Southern California as well probably helped them out a little bit. So if you're looking to insulate your Austin Eckler pick this season, I would suggest taking Joshua Kelly because I really do believe he's going to end up being the backup there.
I have two running backs on my list, and Antonio Gibson's one of them. Josh Kelly's the other. Absolutely agree with you, Rank, that I loved his tape in college, and I think that he's going to be the clear backup here. He's not going to receive the full Melvin Gordon workload, but this is a guy who you should be targeting at RB71 price tag in ADP. Tags, let's go to you.
I'm going to go with another running back here. It's a rookie running back, and it's Zach Moss. I don't think many people realize that Devin Singletary was drafted with a third-round pick. Zach Moss was drafted with a third-round pick after they already knew that Singletary was on the team. A lot of people want to point to Singletary's 5+ yards per carry last year, but I've been digging into NFL's next-gen stats, and Singletary saw 8+ man fronts, so loaded boxes, 5.3% of the time. Obviously, that's extremely low. By comparison, his teammate Frank Gore saw that on almost 38% of his carries. So you can't compare the two. It's not apples to apples. Zach Moss, fortunately, offers something in the passing game that Frank Gore did not. Do I think that Zach Moss is going to overtake Devin Singletary immediately as a starting running back and a guy that is going to outproduce him? Probably not, but I think it's in the realm of possibilities. And then on top of that, if something were to happen to Devin Singletary, you'd see Zach Moss in a 18+ touch role in an offense that is a run-first team, and he's going to get goal line carries. We saw Frank Gore, I think he ranked top 12 last year in goal line carries, and their GM, the Bills GM, have already said that Zach Moss is going to take over that Frank Gore role, especially on the goal line. So Zach Moss is he shouldn't be going outside the top 10 rounds.
You know what? I feel like I'm sorry. Sorry there, Kyle. I didn't mean to cut you off. Not enough to keep me.
Oh, no, you're good.
Not enough to keep me from cutting you off. I flippantly sat there and said, if Joshua Kelly had played at Utah, that's where Zach Moss played. So I was remiss in that one because he wouldn't have played as much if Zach Moss was there. So if he would have gone to Oregon State, so if I can change my official answer to that. He would be, or Oregon, or whatever. I wouldn't have been Arizona State because they had Benjamin Eno. Okay, yeah, or Oregon State. Sorry, I apologize.
Oregon State,
and I agree with the Zach Moss thing too. And funny enough that you mentioned that thing about next gen stats, which by the way, make sure you got to check out next gen stats. I know I'm supposed to be here promoting the NFL fantasy app, which allows you to watch live local games. But our next-gen stats are awesome, and I noticed that too. I'm like, Devin Singletary. Like, it's like the opposing teams are like, dude, he's on the field. Like, back everybody up. Like, we don't need to put anybody in the box.
All right, guys, my last player here that I'm going to bring up, if you are waiting on quarterback and you are going to deploy the streaming quarterback strategy, there are two guys that I think you can target late. Cam Newton is one of them, who I think has a really good matchup in Week 1 against Miami. You're going to find out really quick if he is back to full health. If he is, you have a locked and loaded starting quarterback throughout the entire season. The other guy that I'm going to mention, though, is Tyrod Taylor. You're looking at Tyrod Taylor, a rushing quarterback, is going to do amazing things for fantasy football. Now, am I projecting that Tyrod Taylor is going to be a top 12 quarterback for this whole season? Am I projecting that he's going to start the whole season? Not necessarily. But when you have someone like Tyrod Taylor who goes up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 1, who is a rebuilding defense. I think they've made some significant steps forward, but I don't think they're a top 10 unit by any means. Tyrod Taylor is going to rack up rushing yards, and for that, to get him super, super late, quarterback 32 in ADP, guys, like, he's going super late in 2 quarterback leagues. So if you're listening to this and you play 2 quarterback leagues or super flex leagues, target Tyrod, because you're going to have this guy that you can start. He's going to be on the field for the first half of the season. They have a really good schedule to start the year, and as long as they're winning, he's going to be on the field. Justin Herbert's not going to come on at all in that time until they start to lose and they start to, shift towards the rookie. So I love Tyrod Taylor to start the season. I think that he is someone that you need to target towards the end of your drafts.
I dig it. As a streamer, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think he's more draftable than Daniel Jones is to start the year.
I guess, yeah. Based on the schedule. Let me tell you something, though. I was a former San Diego Chargers season ticket holder living out here in Southern California. I did my predictions. I have the Bengals winning this. I'm like, this is the most Chargers thing ever. They will go to Cincinnati and lose. And I don't know that either Tyrod plays a bunch and ends up getting a bunch of fantasy points because the Chargers are playing from behind. It would probably be a situation where the Bengals go up 28-0, and then Tyrod rallies them for 26 points in the second half. They blow the 2-point conversion on something stupid where Tyrod ends up having a huge game. So I will advocate for that, even though I feel that, and I look at the Chargers schedule, I'm like, they're going to somehow not be as good as everybody thinks they're going to be. But
that defense is so good, but I do worry about the offense. No offensive line there either. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, they brought in, was it Brian Balaga?
Yeah, to play right tackle.
They made a trade, but it's still, I don't know. I know that they upgraded the offensive line, but if you're Phillip Rivers and you're like, hey, our line sucked for years,
yep,
and then when I leave, you guys started to upgrade, like what happened here?
Well, they did win the trade again with Carolina, trading away Russell Okung, a guy who might just retire for a Pro Bowl interior guard in Trey Turner.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, guys, that is all the time we have for today. Huge thank you to Adam Rank for coming on and chatting with us. It was a ton of fun, man.
Oh, thank you so much.
Toasters and garage sales.
You know what? I've talked myself out of being here on Thursday, haven't I?
And well, the next time that you're I hope that you're on with Woody so you can tell him just how bad he is as a character.
I literally hate Woody. I was rooting for the fire at the end of Toy Story 3. I'm like, yeah, burn them all, just to get Woody off this earth. No disrespect to Buzz Lightyear.
Spoiler alert right there.
Stop it. If you haven't, you know what? Okay, I'm sorry. I know I've extended your podcast for 80 minutes. I know. I apologize. I had a valid, oh my gosh, what was my point? Oh no. Okay, I remember. I'm there. I never watched any of these movies. Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Rapunzel, or it's Tangled. Any Disney flick made after the night, because at some point you turn 10, you don't have a reason to see these Disney movies, and I just recently had children, so these movies are now first time movies for me, and so for me to be so casual to dismiss, oh yeah, like if you haven't seen Toy Story 3, it's not like watching Star Wars. It's like, no, you probably won't see these movies until you've had children, and I've just spoiled it for you, so I apologize. So yeah, they all die in a fire in Toy Story 3.
They all die.
No, they don't, because they come back for Toy Story 4, which was completely unnecessary.
That's the only thing that you take away from this episode, is that Toy Story 4 was unnecessary.
But Giggle McDimples was awesome, as was Duke Kaboom.
All right, guys, don't forget to follow Adam on Twitter if you don't already, at Adam Rank. Also, don't forget about our 10-hour live stream happening on Thursday, August 20th, over at youtube.com/fantasypros. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to be eligible for some amazing prize giveaways every single hour, and I just can't wait for this, guys. I'm so excited for it. Mm-hmm. That's going to do it for today. For Mike Taglier and Adam Rank, I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. While you're here, don't forget to check out the featured videos. While you're at it, go over to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Fantasy Pros to get news and updates throughout your season to help you dominate the competition.